The sea was a constant voice in Eider's Cove. It spoke in slow breaths against the black rocks, then hissed back through the pebbles like a secret pulled from a mouth. On the cliff above the water stood Greywatch Manor, a long, pale house with tall windows and a roof like folded wings. Locals called it a lonely place. They said the house heard things at night, soft steps in empty rooms, a piano key touched by air, a woman's whisper under the moon. Elias Hart arrived just before dusk. He came by carriage along the narrow road that ran beside the water. Salt mist touched his coat and hair. He was not old, not young, perhaps 27, with steady hands and a careful way of looking at the world. He had inherited Greywatch from a distant aunt he never knew well. He had no wish for a grand house, but he needed a start, and the house was a start. The driver stopped by the iron gate. Vines curled around the bars like sleeping snakes. The sky held a thin moon, not full but bright enough to draw a silver line on the sea. Elias stepped down and looked up at the house. It seemed to watch him. It seemed to wait. Inside, the room smelled of dust and old wood, but they were not ruined. Chairs stood where chairs should stand. A great clock in the hall ticked in a careful, proud way, though no one had wound it for years. A white sheet covered a small piano in the front parlor, and the sheet hung like a veil. Elias lit a lamp and walked through the rooms with slow steps, touching walls, touching the backs of chairs, letting the place learn him. At the back of the house, a door opened to a narrow balcony. The cliff fell away below it. The sea pulled and pushed like a large animal that could not decide if it loved the land or wanted to eat it. Far out, a lighthouse flashed its eye every few breaths. The village sat to the south, a cluster of roofs and chimneys and one small church with a bell that sounded tired at night. Elias set his bag in the study. He took out paper and a small box with tools for drawing and measuring. He wished to repair the house himself where he could, to see its bones, to know why it sighed in some corners and not in others. He was a man who listened to houses. He believed walls held memories the way books held stories. As he worked, the light faded. The moon grew stronger. He heard the wind slip along the eaves, but there was something else too. Softer than wind, lighter than the breath of a cat, like fabric moving where no hand moved it. He told himself it was the sea finding a crack. He told himself many simple things. Later, when the lamp oil was low, Elias went to the front parlor and pulled the sheet from the piano. Dust rose like weak smoke. The piano was dark walnut, handsome, with a thin scratch across the lid, as if someone had once dragged a ring or a key there in a hurry. He pressed one key. The sound was sharp and lonely. He pressed another. The second note seemed to answer the first in a slow voice. A third note came, but he did not press it. The note was soft, gentle, like a throat clearing from far away. Elias froze. He looked around the room at the corners where shadows gathered, at the tall mirror with a gold frame. He saw only his own reflection. A man with sea-tangled hair, gray eyes, lamp in hand, trying to look brave. He waited. The sound did not come again. He laughed, but his laugh was quiet and did not last. "Old wood," he said to the air as if the room needed an excuse. "Old strings." He covered the piano and went to the kitchen to make tea. The kettle was slow. The water forgot to boil and then remembered. He poured into a cup that had a blue flower on it and took the cup to the back balcony. He rested his arms on the rail and watched the water in the moonlight. It was then he heard the whisper. "Do you hear me?" It was not the wind. It was not the sea. It was a voice as soft as a new page being turned. It was a woman's voice, clear but thin, like it came from under a blanket of years. Elias stood very still. "Is someone there?" he asked, and his voice made a small cloud in the cold night. He felt foolish right after, but the feeling passed. Not because he was brave, but because the night seemed to be waiting for him to answer. Wind moved along the balcony. The lantern beside the door flickered. The whisper came again, closer, like a mouth was at his ear. "Do you hear me now?" Elias turned. No one stood there. The door was open to the back hall. The hall was dark. The clock in the front of the house ticked and ticked. He felt the hair on his arms rise up. "I hear something," he said. "If this is a trick, it is a poor one. If it is not a trick, then speak." A pause. Then very soft, "Thank you." He waited for more. There was nothing for a long time, only the sound of water far below. He tried to ask a question, but found his tongue refusing. He was not sure which question to pick. "Who are you? Where are you? What do you want?" The questions pushed against each other and made his mouth stay shut. At last he said, "I am Elias Hart. This is my house now. I mean no harm." The whisper felt like a breath on the side of his neck. "It was my home," the voice said, "and the sea took it from me." Elias did not move. He kept his eyes on the moon trail across the water. "How did the sea take it?" he asked. "By piece and piece. By promise and promise. The sea is patient," the voice said. There was a sadness in it that made Elias feel he was standing in a church with his hat in his hands. He did not want to be rude to a voice, even a voice without a body. He said, "What is your name?" Silence. The lantern's shadow shook. At last, the whisper came, smaller now, like it had to squeeze through a crack. "Elowen," he repeated it. "Elowen." The name felt right in his mouth. It tasted like salt and roses somehow. "Elowen," he said again, slower, and the sea seemed to nod. A bell rang from the village. 9 slow strokes. Elias cleared his throat. "If you wish to speak, you may. If you wish to be quiet, I will not press. But I would like to understand why you are here." The air cooled as if someone had opened a door to winter. Elias felt a presence move past him, not seen, only known, like when a bird's wing passes close and the air shifts. He turned. The hallway was empty, but he knew he was meant to follow. He took the lantern and walked inside. The steps sounded loud now. His own breathing, which he never noticed, sounded like a stranger's breathing. The whisper went ahead of him. He could not hear words, only the sense of words, like shapes behind glass. The whisper led him to the study. On the floor behind the desk lay a small wooden box he had not noticed before. It was simple, with a plain brass clasp and a slot for a key. The key did not sit there. The slot was empty. Elias put his hand on the lid. It was cold, colder than the rest of the room. He felt a pulse in the wood as if the box had a small heart. "Is this yours?" he asked. The lantern flame pressed itself thin against the glass and then stood straight again. He felt that was an answer. "I don't have the key," he said. A new sound, very quiet, came from the wall, like a nail dragged across plaster. He lifted the lantern. A narrow crack ran from the floor to the chair rail. In the crack, something small and bright was stuck. He set down the lamp, used the blade of his pocket knife, and teased out a thin object, a key no bigger than his little finger. He held it up. The key shone like a wet fish scale and seemed to hum, or perhaps it was his hand that hummed. He knelt and slid the key into the slot. It fit as if time had been waiting for this. The lock turned with a soft click. Elias looked up once at the doorway at the dark hall, at the place where he felt the air gather like a person might gather a shawl. "I am opening it," he said. Inside the box lay a ribbon the color of the sea just before rain, a small silver locket with a dent, and a folded paper. He took the paper first. The edges were soft. The fold had been made many times and opened many times and then left alone for years. He opened the paper. It was a letter. Elias read by the lantern light. Elowen. "If the tide keeps its word, we will meet by the North Pier when the moon is full. Do not fear the old stories. A promise is stronger than salt. I will bring the ring. I will bring the boat. Wait for me." The letter ended there. No date, only the sea's name written between the lines because he could smell it even now. Elias felt a soft, honest ache move through his chest like someone had pressed a palm there to steady him, and then took the hand away. He turned the locket in his fingers. The dent looked like the mark a stone would make if thrown by a jealous hand. He clicked the locket open. Inside was a miniature drawing in faded color. A young woman with dark hair, level eyes, and a mouth that looked brave even when closed. The other side held a thin lock of hair, brown as wet sand. "Is this you?" Elias asked the air. For a moment the room felt full the way a room feels when too many people are in it and their warmth climbs the windows. The lantern flame rose, then sank. He knew the answer was yes. He put the locket back and lifted the ribbon. Salt had stiffened it. The ribbon smelled like old flowers kept in a book. He returned it to the box and closed the lid without locking it. The key he kept in his palm. "Who is A?" he asked. "Did he come? Did he keep his word?" The whisper moved close to his ear, so close he felt it as coolness on his skin. He expected a word, but none came. Instead, he heard the slow, bare sound of a sob that would not fully start. He felt something like small fingers brush the edge of his sleeve, then pull away in shy fear. He stood, careful, slow. "All right," he said. "We will not rush. We will learn the story piece by piece. I will listen." He took the box and the lantern and walked back to the front parlor. The moon painted a long, pale rug across the floorboards. He set the box on the piano and took off the sheet again. The wood glowed like quiet honey. He pressed the same first key as before, then the second. He waited. The third note came again, soft and small and not of his doing. "Thank you," he said to the empty air, "for trusting me." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, a breath inside the room, inside the house, inside the sea that wrapped the cliff. "I remember," Elowen whispered. "I remember the night. I remember the water climbing the steps. I remember the ring." "The ring?" Elias asked. "Is it here?" "Not here," she said. "Below." The word fell like a stone through the floor. Elias looked down as if his eyes could see past wood and rock to the dark water below the cliff. He felt in his bones a map, a line down through the earth to a ledge, a narrow path, a forgotten stair cut in stone, and the constant breath of the sea at the end of it. He understood nothing, and he understood enough. He closed the piano. He placed the box under his arm. He blew out the lantern and opened the front door. Moonlight poured in like milk. The air smelled of salt and something else. Wild roses, maybe, though roses did not bloom at night. He went outside. The path along the cliff was thin and mean in places, with little stones that wanted to roll the wrong way. The sea whispered up to him and then down again. To his left, the village lamps made a small necklace of yellow beads along the shore. To his right, the lighthouse blinked slow, patient eyes. He walked with care, the box tight against his side, the key warm in his hand now, not cold. Halfway to the north edge, he found what he did not know he was looking for. A narrow stair cut into the cliff face, hidden by dark grass and an old thorn bush. Wind had chewed at it for years. The steps were wet with spray and could not be trusted, but they were still steps. He looked down into the throat of the cliff. The sea moved in sleep, slow and heavy, but every so often a wave reached up as if to touch him. He felt that small presence at his shoulder, watching, waiting. He said, "If I go down, will you come with me?" The answer came at once, not his word, but his closeness, a careful, cold closeness at his side. He thought he felt the shape of a hand try to find his hand and almost succeed. Elias took the first step, then the second. The rock was slick. The night was large. He did not hurry. He did not stop. He went down into the hush between water and stone while the moon watched and the house watched and the old village held its breath. Behind him, Greywatch Manor stood quiet and tall, but not lonely now. In one high window for a moment, a pale shape showed like a face in a dream, and then the face was gone. Elias reached the ledge halfway down the cliff. The sea breathed below, a dark animal with a bright spine where the moon lay on it. The ledge ran toward a low arch in the rock. Beyond the arch came the small, careful sound of water filling a place and then leaving it. Elias moved toward it with slow feet. "Elowen," he said, and the name was a promise. A whisper answered from the arch, from the rock, from the cold air itself. "Elias." He stopped. She had never said his name before. He had never told it to her on the balcony. He had told it in the open night, but she spoke it now like she had known it long before he came. He turned toward the archway, heart steady but strong in his chest, and felt for the first time that the story he had entered did not begin with him at all.